You again. Okay.
Well,
great.
Jacob Burgett passed away, and I think it was after my father came from the war, but he was drafted and was in the infantry, and they had a tough time. They fought in trenches, which would become flooded with water, so their feet were wet all the time, and they had inhaled mustard gas, poison gas. So when he came home, he was pretty much, I think he also smoked, but anyway, his lungs were affected.
How old was he when he went to war?
How old was he? I don't know. I think probably maybe 20 or 21.
And then when did he come home?
Well, he was there for a few years. I can't tell you that. I'd have to look it up. But the nice thing was that he sent postcards to my mother. He was sort of courting her. They had met at a dance, and so I have all the postcards that he wrote from France, and sometimes funny postcards, and sometimes very cute little jokes that he would write to her. And of course the understanding was that they would get married when he got out of the service.
So let's go back. How did they meet, and when did they meet before he left?
I'm not sure. I think they met at a dance. I think there used to be dances which anybody could attend, and they were in some public building like a town hall or something. And apparently they had a lot of fun together, and I think my Uncle Fred, her brother, also went to these dances, and the whole family did. It was a good, wholesome kind of entertainment, which I'm not sure, because the building that's now the town hall in Brant was the Methodist church, so they all went to the Methodist church, and they had a young people's group which was called Epworth League, and I think they did all sorts of activities as young people in a church setting. But I don't think the Methodists really liked dancing, so where my mother and father met, but it was a dance, and he was planning to marry her when he got home, and he did, and they were married in 1920, and they didn't have a house to live in, so they lived with Grandpa and my grandmother Henrietta for 3 years or 2 years until they bought a house.
Right.
And that's the one where I was born, the house on Hardpan Road.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thing was, before my father went to the army, he was a farmer, or helped his father be a farmer, but he worked at a place called the Queen City Dairy, and this was a large milk processing plant, which they got the milk from the farmers, they put it in huge milk cans, put it on the train and sent it to Buffalo. So this dairy was right on the railroad, and that was what he did. But he was very stingy, thrifty, saved his money. So when they bought this farm, after he got out of the service, they paid cash for it. But a house with 35 acres, the house, a barn for the equipment, a barn for the horses and cows, a chicken coop, a corn crib, then they called another building a granary. They stored the oats and the wheat in that, an outhouse, and so they bought that for something like $5,000 cash.
Wow.
Imagine having that much money. And he had saved it all, never had any vices, no places to spend it. So they moved in, and they were very happy there, and exceptionally happy when they had me, of course. That was 3 years after they were married and had been living with with Henrietta and John Witters. So my mother was terrified of childbirth and saddened beyond belief because her mother had just died. So her mother.
So Henrietta never met you?
No, and I never met her, but that was why I was named, because my mother was still mourning. Her mother died in March, and I was born in July. So that was a very sad time for her. Plus, it hurt like hell. And from then on, she didn't want any more kids. She knew that for sure because it was so painful. But we used to tease because if she saw a movie like Gone with the Wind, when Melanie was having the baby and groaning, my mother would have to leave the theater. She's getting nauseous just thinking about it. So, anyway, they lived very happily and very frugally because they'd spent all their money on the house and the property.
What was the name? What was the town that the house was in?
Well, it was still Brant. It was outside the city limits,
okay.
But it was on the way to Farnham, and it was called, our street was called the Hard Pan Road, but the street was the Brant Farnham Road, which they laughingly called Mud Street, because the house that Grandpa Winters, John C., and Henrietta lived in was way down on Mud Street, and after a few years they sold it and then moved to the house that I lived in. Which was
what year was it that you were born?
1923.
Okay.
That was
born in the house or in a hospital, or where were you born?
Born in the bedroom, and in the same bed that my mother had for years, and no doctor. But I think they did have a nurse midwife, and maybe called a doctor, because we did have a family doctor who had a house right down the street.
Did most women have the babies in the bed?
Oh, sure.
And not go to the hospital?
No, there was no hospital near. There was not a hospital outside of Buffalo, which would have been about 35, maybe 40 miles away. So they did all the right things because they heard about a nurse who was trained to help. She wasn't a midwife, but that was what she did. She took care of women in childbirth. And we have pictures of her holding me when I was just born, wearing a white uniform. So she apparently had some training, and she indoctrinated my mother in a lot of good sound advice, things that would help in nursing, or all the things that people in my generation, or Gloria's, you just bought a Dr. Spock, or was it Dr. Spock, the baby doctor? Anything you wanted to know was in that book, or you could get some information from the library. But my mother didn't have that opportunity. It was what other ladies told you was just word of mouth. Could be true or could be superstition. But anyway, I was born in July, and in possibly the Christmas time, my Uncle Fred, my mother's older brother, and his wife Emily had a baby. They had had a baby about a year before, so they came to visit the new mother and the new baby. And unfortunately, my cousin Frederick was coming down with whooping cough or something awful, so I caught it.
Oh no.
And I almost died the first winter, and the thing being that when you have this whooping cough, you can't hold any food down, you just cough it up. And so I was really, really sick. And my mother always kind of held it against them that they should have kept their germs at home, but
that was her brother.
Her brother and his wife,
right? Okay.
and they came with their son Frederick, who's another story entirely. But anyway, they came to visit, and I got whooping cough. And my mother had read in some book that any child that gets whooping cough before they're a year old is not going to make it. So that scared her.